Hi everyone, welcome back to my booktube channel, Lisa in Bookland, and this is my TBR for the Irish Readathon, which is coming up in March. So the Irish Readathon is hosted by Aoife from Words of Clover and Leanne from Leanne Rose, and it takes part throughout all of March, and the point of it is to read as many books by Irish authors as you can, or more than you would usually. So I'll leave the link to their announcement videos down below. I'm very excited for this Irish Readathon because it's the first one I'm going to be taking part in officially. I put on my Galway jersey because what could be more Irish than wearing a GA jersey at any time? The answer is nothing. Nothing could be more Irish. But yes, anyways, so I have a lot of books to read and I can't wait to get to them all and to share them with you. So the first prompt is to read an Irish non-fiction book. If you're familiar with my channel, I love history. It's one of my favourite things to read about. I suppose there's so many non-fictions you could read for this, but I did go for a non-fiction history somewhat predictably. In recent years, with the anniversaries that have been happening of, say, 1916, independence, the foundation of the Irish Free State, and this year it'll be the start of the Civil War, I been focusing very much on kind of late 19th century, early 20th century Irish history. So I wanted a book that went a little bit further back, but because you know, I hadn't really decided what area I wanted to learn a lot more about, I wanted kind of a general history. We did go through some of this in school, but it was primary school, it was a very long time ago, and things didn't really make a lot of sense to me at the time. So I had heard of this book. I think it's quite a well-known Irish history, Modern Ireland 1600 to 1972, so all the way from like the Battle of Kinsale back in 1601 to the Troubles in 1972. It is a very long book, so I'll be dipping in and out of it throughout the month of March, I'm sure. So yeah, it'll be good to kind of brush up this history a bit and yeah, to branch out. So the second prompt is to read an Irish children's book, and I'm going for a reread for this one because I've been meaning to reread it for a long time, and that is The New Policeman by Keith Thompson. I remember reading this while I was in primary school, and a lot of my classmates were also reading it. It's set in Kinvara, which is an area quite local to me. The premise of the book is, so the main character is this boy called JJ. He's 15, and his mother for her birthday says that she would like more time because there's never enough time in the village that they live in, so JJ goes out to try and buy her some time. But yeah, I can't really remember how much is safe to say without giving away spoilers, but there's kind of a magical element. Music is very important in this book. Music would be a big thing in that part of Ireland especially, and at the end of every chapter there's like sheet music for different Irish traditional tunes, so that's really fun as well. And yeah, just a really fun read, and like this is definitely the epitome of Irish children's fiction to me. So the next prompt I'm really excited about, and that's to read a book that's set in the 1920s. For anybody unfamiliar with Irish history, there was kind of a war of independence from Britain from like the 1910s and the 1920s, and the Irish Free State was founded in 1921, which was followed unfortunately by a bit of a civil war in Ireland. But so there's lots of interesting Irish historical fiction set in that time, and I have picked up some recently. So the first book I'm going to talk about is The Informer by Liam O'Flaherty. This book kind of double fills the prompt, I suppose, that it was both written in the 1920s, it was written in 1925, and it's also set in the 1920s. So this is set during the War of Independence. It's about, as the title would imply, a spy. It seems to be about this character that betrays some of his former comrades. So yeah, a bit of a dark read, but definitely it'll be interesting to read a book that was written by somebody that experienced that time. So yeah, and I believe that the author Liam O'Flaherty was actually born in the Aran Islands, so it's nice to read a book written by somebody from Galway as well. So the next book I'm going to talk about you'll have seen in my Cornwall book haul, and this is The Winter Guests by W.C. Ryan. So this book is again set in the 1920s. It's set in this big house inhabited by this gentry family, and an IRA ambush goes wrong and the daughter of the house is actually killed. And this is about the investigation, and the investigation I believe is conducted by this, I suppose, Free State intelligence officer called Captain Tom Harkin. And he was actually the girl who was killed, who was her former fiance. So yeah, I think this would be a really interesting read, maybe some interesting interactions between the IRA captain and the family, and the background of the Civil War and how they deal with that. And yeah, I hope it'll be a better read about, you know, a family in a big house dealing with post-independence Ireland than The Secret Guest, which I read last month and was quite disappointed by. So the fourth prompt is to read an Irish book that one of the hosts has already read. So this book has been on my shelf for a while, and it has previously been read and highly recommended by the host Aoife from Words of Clover. And this is A Ghost in the Throat by Doireann Ní Ghríofa. This actually won the Irish Book of the Year last year in the Irish Book Awards, so I really am overdue reading this, and I should have read it last year really. But yeah, I guess it's been a while since people had been talking about this, and I can't remember too many of the specifics. I believe it's kind of semi-autobiographical, and it's about this poet from the 1700s, and how the author discovers her poetry. So a little bit outside my comfort zone, but I've heard it so highly recommended and talked about that I decided I will give it a try. So yeah, I'll be interested to see how I get on, and I'm sorry I can't give any better details, but I'm sure if you search Aoife's previous videos, she'll describe it much better than I can, and I'll let you know how I got on with it in the end. So the fifth prompt is to read a book set in Northern Ireland. So this book, I suppose, could have fulfilled the prompt for being set in the 1920s as well, but I decided to keep it for this prompt. And the book is The Sunken Road by Kieran McMenamin. It's set in County Fermanagh, which is in Northern Ireland. So it's about these two boys unfortunately that go off to fight in the First World War, and one of their sisters called Annie. So unfortunately one of the boys doesn't come back from the war, and the other one has to go back and explain to his sister you know, what happened, and deal with the aftermath of that, and deal with, I suppose, coming back to Ireland after having fought in the British Army for the First World War. This is something that I suppose Ireland has really been struggling to come to terms with in the last few years, and recognise the contribution of Irish soldiers in the First World War, which is something that has been neglected in the past. So very interesting subject matter, and yeah, it's kind of a nice short enough book to read as well. And yeah, I definitely haven't read a lot of books set in Northern Ireland, and I know this is probably kind of pre the foundation of Northern Ireland, but yeah, will be an interesting read. So the bonus prompts are to read a green book. So one of the ones that I already talked about, The New Policeman, is obviously a very green book, but I might get to it. You know, some of them books are quite short. I do have another green book, and this is one I picked up second hand a while ago as well, The Charnel House by Eamon McGrath, and this is set in the 1950s in a tuberculosis sanatorium, and it's kind of green as well. This book was released in 1990, and it appears just to be about the characters and how they deal with this awful disease that was a big killer in that time. And the back description is really nice. It just says, "Raging against the dying of the light, this is not only a novel about tuberculosis, but also a deeply felt examination of the nature of suffering and the unexpected strength of human spirit." So finally, the last prompt is to read the group book, and that is Boys Don't Cry by Fiona Scarlett, which I believe is about some boys that live in very hard circumstances in Dublin and how they deal with that. So I will also be reading along with that, probably on ebook, as I haven't found a physical copy of it yet. So that's all the books that cover the prompts. I just wanted to mention one or two more just in case I do get to them at the end. To my eternal shame, I have never read any Maeve Binchy, who's a very, very well-known Irish author, so I did find this book again second-hand in my local town, a very battered copy of A Circle of Friends by Maeve Binchy. It's a big one, but I'll try to get to it. So I believe it's about these two friends that go to study in Trinity, which is where I went to college, so that might bring back some nice memories, and how they deal with the change from moving from rural Ireland up to the big smoke Book of Dublin, so yeah, it might be just a nice read, and definitely I'll be able to hold my head up high and say I finally have read some Maeve Binchy. And the last book I'm going to talk about, I promise, is another book that was very highly talked about last year, and that is Strange Flowers by Donal Ryan. I've again heard great things about this book. I believe it's about this girl who goes missing, and then obviously how her family deal with that, and several years later she comes back, but she now has a child with her, and yeah, how her family react when she comes back in a very difficult situation. So yeah, that's also by an Irish author, and that will be the last books that I'm trying to commit to read to in March. So let me know what books you're going to be reading for the Irish Readathon, or whether you're going to be joining in, or let me know any books that you'd recommend. I'm always happy to find new Irish authors, and there's so many of them, and yeah, it's probably an area I do neglect sometimes, so it's so great to have this readathon to really focus in on it. I probably will try to read mostly Irish books during the month of March. I definitely will have to get through that big TBR, but thanks so much to the hosts for hosting this readathon as usual, and yes, I'll see you next Thursday for another video.